G'day, it's Joel Rasmussen from Southern Cross Combat, and I'm here at Absolute MMA in Collingwood talking to the great Jack Jenkins. Jack, I thank you very much for the time. It is a Wednesday. How is your Wednesday treating you?
Yeah, really good. I had a fun session this morning with Al and Joey and the other boys. We were out at the ring gym in Braybrook, and my coach Andy said nothing crazy this morning, just like a good solid session, but nothing crazy. And then he proceeded to put me through the hardest session I've done for the whole camp. So I'm the boys are downstairs training, and I'm kind of cruising through the afternoon after that.
It's just recovering from the crazy session. What was it? What made it so particularly difficult?
Just we rotated through. We did like fight simulation stuff, so getting up off your back and then doing pads. And the hardest thing in MMA is transitioning between systems. So going from like grappling, which is very lactic heavy and that sort of stuff, and then going to a more aerobic like striking, and then back to grappling, and your muscles get tired from being wound up in the wrestle, and then you've got to go back to being really loose, and swapping between those fitness systems is probably the hardest thing. So it was grappling into pads into sparring, grappling into pads into sparring on repeat. So that over and over again is very taxing on the body.
You talked about how that was the hardest session of the camp thus far. I feel like we're in an interesting point in your camp because it is, if I'm not mistaken, about 4 weeks out from the fight. What does, at this point of camp, look like for you? Are we now beginning to really ramp up before the drop-off to keep everything warm? Like, what is this point in camp like?
Yeah, this week and next week are the 2 weeks where you've got really high volume but really high intensity. Sort of 3 weeks from now, so the week before the fight, the intensity stays really high, but the volume drops right off. So you're trying to just let your body kind of like come to a peak. And then obviously fight week, we're just training sort of once a day for 45 to 60 minutes just to keep the wheels ticking over. But there's an element in these 2 weeks where it's like, suck it up. You just got to, be in the hurt locker for a bit.
This is like the next 2 weeks a hell week for you.
Yeah, to an extent, but if you're a young amateur fighter or someone coming up, if you can get yourself used to like expecting those sessions to be hard and finding like some joy in it, eventually by the time, I'm already 4 weeks into a camp, and it feels like I don't look back on it and go, that was hell. Like it's just par for the course because I've done it over the last 10 years. So you're used to that level and that load. Whereas if you build it up in your head and you make it like, oh, I've got this big camp and it's going to be really hard, then, you're more likely to have crashes and deal with that sort of stuff afterwards.
And now I do have to ask, I'm sure the people at home have noticed, probably the first thing they noticed, the haircut. The mullet is gone. It's now the very nice buzzed look. Is there any reason for that?
Yeah, look, I was just over the mullet, to be fair. It's a lot of work to keep that, especially when it's easy when I'm training, I can just throw a hat on, but obviously I have to do a little bit more media and that sort of stuff these days. So to, go through the process of doing it after training or worrying about it, I was just over it, so just shaved it.
How was the family reaction, the partner's reaction? How was everyone's reaction to the head shave?
Everyone was good. The boys gave me a bit of lip about it, but Simon particularly, but everyone else was good.
I like the mullet and the mustache combo. I feel it was very you. I like that we at least kept the mustache.
Yeah, I had to keep something. I couldn't get rid of it all. I had to keep like a little bit. That was one thing where I was like, fucking, the mullet's almost part of like my identity now. I have to keep it, but I thought it was probably a good time for it to go.
Talking before about the camp. Now this is it's been a few UFC camps for yourself now, and talking about almost you begin to build that fighter identity. People outside of the local scene and outside of Australia begin to know who Jack Jenkins is. Just when you kind of look at when you entered the UFC compared to now, like what has being in the UFC taught you?
I don't know about taught me like on a holistic approach to anything. But just as a fighter, I think it kind of took me a couple of fights just to find my feet in the UFC, because you get used to like fighting on the local shows, and some are run slightly differently to others, but the process is all very much the same. Like when you're out the back, it's the same, and you're dealing with the same people, and you're not traveling very far and that sort of stuff. And then you kind of go from there and you immediately go to the UFC. So it's like there's no bridging. There's not really a bridging where you go up and up and up. It's like you're fighting in front of 2,000 people and then you're fighting in front of millions, and there's no in between. And it took me a few fights to really get that under my belt. And I think probably the first time I felt really comfortable was my last fight, like the Herbert Burns fight, and I think that probably was reflected in the performance and the whole fight week, where I knew what to expect of everything, and you're more comfortable. Sounds silly, but little things like when you go in, the way the lighting dims and the way it like they say the bright lights, the bright lights, but the way that it dims and the crowd and everything, how you react to that. And now I feel like I know what to expect, so I'm getting more out of myself.
I was speaking to a teammate of yours who is about to make his UFC debut, Khan Offley, and he was just talking to me about this concept of kind of like protecting his energy. And you talk about there, you kind of get used to it, the bright lights and stuff. How does like life change? And I don't necessarily mean like day to day. You still come into the gym, you still work hard, you still are there for your teammates, you're still at local shows. But how does kind of life change once you get into those bright lights? And as you said, now millions of people watch you fight.
Yeah, in some respects, it's like drastic changes, like getting recognized when you walk down the street or going out, things like that. You have less responsibilities in some areas, like I'm not coaching anymore or anything to make ends meet, but then a lot more responsibility in other areas in terms of like having to do media obligations, things like that. But I think probably the biggest thing now is like the results of fights have such a big impact on your life now. So most people know, but in the UFC, you make double the money if you win the fight, essentially every time. Or you can, depending if you're a glass half full or a glass half empty, you make half the money if you lose, right? So when you talk about like planning for your life and stuff, most of us, when you're coming up through the scene, you want to get to the UFC. You just want to be in there in the UFC. And once you get there, then you start thinking about the consequences of making mistakes. And like, for example, in the Sydney fight, you make the mistake and you cost yourself, tens of thousands of dollars and time and that sort of thing. So the pressure builds as you would expect it to. But yeah, that's probably the only thing I could put my finger on, is that the ramifications of winning or losing fights are just, astronomically different.
I wanted to talk about that Sydney fight. I wanted to bring this up to you. I saw an interview you did recently where you were listing about who you think kind of the top Aussies in the UFC are, and you listed a lot of people. You put yourself fourth, which I think you've been a bit humble there, but that's just my opinion. Something that really stuck out to me about not the Sydney fight, the last fight, the Perth fight, was in the cage, you say, put me on Canada. And by the time you got back to us in the media room, you were like, they're not putting me on Canada. You've come off, in my opinion, one of, if not the best performance of your career. You're coming off time away. What are your thoughts on you kind of being held and kept in Australia? Because you fought your whole career here.
Yeah, look, it's hard because it was partly the injury that kept me out. And even though we were ready earlier, I wasn't mad about waiting till the Perth card. And then Sean Shelby, it was a catch-22 because he came to see me out the back. And anyone who's in the UFC will tell you, Sean keeps his cards pretty close to his chest. So he doesn't often praise, he doesn't often say negative things, but he came out the back to see me and he said, really happy, really impressed. That was a great performance. Well done. And then I said straight away, thanks very much. What about Canada? I want to fight again this year. And he kind of went, that fight that I called for wasn't really going to be an option. And he kind of went, well, we'll see. I'll talk to Tim, who's my manager, Tim Simpson. And then Tim was pushing really hard to get me one towards the end of the year. And they just sort of said, you can wait and you can be like a late call-up style. Like maybe we'll get you in on 3-4 weeks notice for like a late year card. Or we're back in February. We can just tell you right now you're locked for February. And I was like, mentally and stuff, I'm happy to just sit back and wait. So while I have been kept in the Australian market and I have been kept on the shelf a little bit, there's been various factors that have played a part in that. So I don't think they're necessarily making the decision we're keeping Jack in Australia. But in saying that, after this fight, I want to get it. I want at least 3 fights this year. I feel like I'm really coming into my prime and I just can't afford to waste time.
You do sell a lot of tickets too, so that's another reason to keep you in Oz. But maybe you could sell some tickets overseas as well. I think you could.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think you can put me on the Australian card, and I think I resonate well enough with the Australian audience that they don't feel like they're getting shortchanged for a decent fight. Whereas, maybe someone of a similar level to me, if it was an American and a Brazilian, they'd be like, what's this fight? We don't really care about this. So, yeah, I get that, but you do have to leave the nest at some point.
And spread the wings and fly. Talking about a fighter of your level, I actually wanted to ask about that. Before we talk about this upcoming fight, this is the last question, then we'll actually talk about the fight. There was a rumor swelling that people in the top 15 were turning you down. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, but that's what they got. That's what my management was told, and then we kind of pushed and said, "Well, who was it? Who turned me down?" Because then you kind of have a little card there you can play of like, "Well, he said no," or "She said no," that sort of thing. And they said, "Well, we can't tell you that because they might have turned it down for medical reasons or whatever, or they don't want the fight, or they don't want to come to Australia, and that's not the matchmaker's position to tell that." But they were. We were obviously surprised with this matchup, and then, they did say that they had offered it to multiple people in the top 15, and they weren't interested.
Do you feel you are beginning to encroach on that top 15?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a win here will put me either at 15 or in a position to fight someone ranked 10 to 15. And there's so many good options coming up. You can go win this fight, win very impressively, and the world opens up to you. I don't like to look past any opponent, but as the great Conor McGregor said, you don't have to look past them, but you can absolutely look through them. And I think I've got all the tools to beat Gabriel Santos and set myself up for a big year.
How did the Gabriel Santos fight come to be in that case?
They messaged and said, Gabriel Santos, Sydney, and we said, okay. that was it.
Simple enough, I suppose. What do you make of Gabriel Santos as a fighter?
Look, he on paper, his UFC record doesn't reflect his ability. His first fight in the UFC was on a week's notice, and he lost a split decision to Lerone Murphy, who's ranked number 10 in our division. And in that split decision, 9 out of 10 of the media judges had it scored in his favour. So he's arguably lost a split decision there that he should have won. Then he's gone and fought David Unamar, and he had a really successful first round and then got caught in the second. And now he's coming off a win against a road to UFC winner in his last fight, and it was a first round KO. He's from the MMA generation. He's not from that generation before us where, they started in kickboxing or jiu-jitsu and then they've merged over. He's always been an MMA guy. And I think he is a very dangerous, very aggressive, very credible opponent that can get you towards the top 15.
Talking about your last fight, you talked about how you felt it was kind of the best performance of your career. I think it was an absolutely fantastic showing for yourself. What does this fight look like for you? Is this like see his weaknesses and then attack those things? Are you going in there to just implement your game? How do you kind of approach an opponent like this?
Well, there's a couple of things to take into account. Number one being that I always will prefer to strike if the option's there to me. Couple of reasons. A, it's the style of fighter I want to be. Like, I like to strike. I enjoy it, and I think it resonates the best with the fans and the company. So all those things match up for me. I'm going to do that. But looking at him, it's a little harder because he fights both orthodox and southpaw. He's a very aggressive striker with really clean technique. He's also a very accomplished grappler. So you look across his record and you're trying to find, like, where do we think he's going to go in this fight? And it's hard to pick. He might go, I'm not interested in the striking, and he might push the grappling straight away. Or he might back himself to be switching stances and avoiding the leg kick and, come out and think he can take me on in a striking fight. So for us, it's just been about, like, sharpening up some of the things that I do really well and practicing and, preparing well enough for some of the things that we know he definitely does well.
Talking about that preparation, you posted a photo recently, I believe it was on your Instagram story, I can't remember how long ago, sometime within this week. It seemed to be you lying down just in the rain. It was heavy rain. I think it was here in the car park, maybe.
No, it's at my other gym, at the Ring Gym.
At the Ring. Why?
Well, I'd been smashed on pads, and we kind of have a good system at the gym because everyone needs to get pads, and it's just the fighters in the morning, kind of like highest priority guys and guys who are probably the most senior get there the earliest, and we start earlier, and then the other guys start an hour later after us. So I get my pads in, and I'm already warm, ready to go as they're all arriving at the gym. And I got smashed on pads, and it was raining, and I just went outside to kind of be in the rain, and then ended up being so cooked after the pads, I just thought I'd lie down for a bit, and then I look back inside, and there's people at the door with their phones out, like, oh, like laughing at me lying in the rain. But it's just a nice feeling, like when you push yourself to the limit and you know you've done the work in training, you're just so much more free in the cage.
I know fighters can approach the fighting in so many different ways. There are people who it's very spiritual. Some people it's just a sport. Some people it's just a job. The reason I brought up lying in the rain is, to me, it appeared to be maybe like a grounding thing. I don't know if you're into that type of stuff. Are you a fighter like that, or is this kind of just like work?
Nah, it's just work for me. Like, I don't get into too much of that. Like, I'm a warrior or gladiators or anything like that. You know, I think the only part of us that's like a warrior, like gladiator, is just the warrior stuff. Mentally, we have to be like tough. You have to go really hard at things. And then gladiator, where people like to use that word, it's more just we entertain. We fight to entertain. But I'm under no false pretenses that what we do is on the level of, you know, soldiers or the gladiators who used to come back in the day. But I'm not really into that sort of thing. I just come in, train my ass off, treat it more like a job and more like a challenge day to day. I love learning off my coaches and getting like critical feedback. Like, I'm really driven by, like, both my coaches will tell you, I don't like feed so much off positive reinforcement. It's easier to tell me like, you're not doing this well, and you'll get a bigger improvement out of me, rather than like, you're doing really well. So I like solving problems in that sense, and I like being the center of attention. I like being, you know, the guy in there doing big things. So it's easy to get motivated.
No man in the arena getting posted on your Instagram anytime soon?
Nah, look, you know, maybe earlier in my career I might have got a little bit swayed into things like that and thought a little bit too deeply about it. At the end of the day, it's just a sport. It's just a sport, and it's not the most important thing in the world. Like, more important spending time with your family and your partner, and it's more important to treat your teammates and your coaches well than it is to win, and more important to like be the person you want to represent than it is to, you know, do any of the other stuff. So yeah, I just like doing it for a sport. It beats sitting behind a desk for 8 hours a day.
Talking about some of those things that you do outside of the sport, I believe your bio now says CEO, and I did some research. I don't know if that's about one horse or like a whole team. I don't know. I'm not a horse racing guy. What are you now the CEO of? What are these businesses that you've got going on outside of the cage?
Yeah, so War Chest Racing is a racing syndicate that I've started with a few of my mates. We've got one filly at the moment, and yeah, look, we're looking to take over the thoroughbred racing industry. We currently have a portfolio of about $2,500 of horses, which, if you know much about horses, we own about a toenail.
It seemed like a lot. I think that's a lot.
No, much of a filly. Nah, it's just me and my friends. Like, it's something we can do together. We just muck around, and we want to sort of have a couple of horses, and more as an excuse for us to just hang out together. So it's not even anything real. We just like taking the piss and having fun.
Now, is War Chest also the name of the horse?
War Chest is the name of our group chat.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So it's the War Chest because it's like, you don't want to open up what's happened in there.
Oh God, the group chat has leaked.
Everyone's group chat. Like, I don't think there's a soul on the planet that's group chat leaks and they don't start thinking back and going, "Oh,
Jail time."
Yeah. Where am I cooked here?
Can you say the name of the horse, or is that like a faux pas?
No, it's unraced. It doesn't have a name yet. We want to call her our Oklahoma. But she's having a little bit of trouble with under the saddle at the moment, so she needs a little bit more pre-training before we can get her to the races.
And along with businesses outside of the cage, you kind of talked about spending time with your teammates and the people who surround you. Now, obviously, you've seen my face around here enough. I'm familiar with the Absolute crew, but I'm mostly familiar with kind of the group of welterweights. And I know from the lovely Absolute sparring vlogs that can be seen on YouTube, it's kind of broken up into weight classes, and everyone below this weight goes together, everyone above. Who are the people that you work with? Who are your like day-to-day training partners?
Sem Kikembo obviously Alistair Valdez and Mason Nobetsu are probably my main guys. Khan fits into that as well, like Khan Offley, but he's just, he wanted to go to CKB to sort of fix some things, or not maybe fix is the wrong word, but focus on some things that he thought were important. And we've got a good relationship with CKB and that gym and all those guys. So when Khan's here, he's absolutely in that group. But the three main guys are Sem, Alistair, and Mason. And they've all improved so much. Like Sem has always been relatively close to me in ability level. Like he's always been really good. But Al and Mason probably have really stepped up over the last 12 to 18 months and become like, rather than just training partners who sort of float around the gym, they've become like part of that core group that I need to be able to function.
I feel you're a man who is incredibly well does very well at marketing himself. Is that something that came naturally to you, or was that always part of the plan? Was it like make the UFC, and the UFC isn't the moneymaker, it's everything you can do outside of it?
Yeah, I think like it's no secret that just fighting in the UFC you don't make a lot of money. And so I was kind of, when I was on the local scene, I thought like what can I do to maximize, my value that I can bring to people and, potentially set myself up by fighting. And the first thing I did was like I had this list of things I wanted to do, and the first thing was like, to be able to capture the fan base of my hometown. So like if I felt like if I couldn't resonate with the people in the town that I grew up in and get them invested in my career and my journey, then how would I ever do it with like the broader, Australian fan base? And I think I did that really well. And once I kind of tapped into that, then the next thing when I won the Australian title was like, all right, now I want to get like Melbourne and Victorians invested. And then once I get to the UFC, then I can get Australia as a whole invested in it. And I think I just tried to be myself. Like I tried to be authentic, but I tried to show the parts of myself that are the most entertaining. Like if I want to, I can sit in interviews and I can be very vanilla and I can be very, not edgy and, and that's still me. I'm still being authentic to myself. Or I can be myself that's a bit more out there, a bit more, jovial or whatever it is, and then try and put that version of myself across. And that's the one that's what I've tried to do with the media, is treat it more like a fun thing to do. And it's, got me to where I am now.
We've talked about, you just touched on there, getting Bacchus Marsh behind you, and I talked about War Chest. So we've talked about two of the three things that sit in your Instagram bio, and I'd like to talk about the third thing. The first time I ever asked you any questions in a media forum, I brought this up to you. The third thing that sits in your Instagram bio, as far as I remember, is Dana White's One Trick Pony. We talked before about the kind of the spirituality and stuff around fighting. Are you a man who believes in like fate or destiny or anything like that?
No, absolutely not. No. I think your destiny is in your hands. And I think, people believe what they want to believe, whether it might be a god. Some people like to think that God's in control of certain things, or other people believe it's the universe and destiny of some sort. I'm a big free will man, so I think if it's meant to be, it's up to me, essentially. So if it doesn't go well, it's my fault. And I think that as a fighter, as someone who's like agency is so important. Like when people ask me about the elbow, they're like, "Oh, that was just unlucky. Like you were winning that fight." I always make a point to stop people and say, "No. I made a mistake. Here's the mistake I made. I'll show you. He did this throw. I defended it the wrong way. That was my mistake. That was a choice that I made that ended in this happening." Whereas if you look at it the other way and you go, "Oh, it was just meant to be. It was unlucky. It wasn't my night," then you might not ever, make the corrections and changes that you need to get better. So I'm a big there is no destiny or fate. You get given things and you choose what you may do with them.
Well, in that case, the reason I ask is then what goes through your head as a man whose fight nickname is Far Jack, a man who has such a burning passion for horse racing, when Dana White calls you a one-trick pony? Like, he uses the pony, that's a horse. He called you a horse. Yeah. And I don't know if he knows who Far Lap is, because so do I. I don't know if he's a big horse racing guy. Yeah. So what went through your head when he called you one-trick pony, which is like such a you phrase, something that could be so easily attributed to you purely for the horse reference?
Well, I can tell you exactly what went through my head, because I was sitting there and you don't know whether you got a contract or not, and it's just the most nerve-wracking thing you can go through in your life, I think, apart from like maybe medical stuff. But I'm sitting there, and he goes, my problem with Jack is that he looked like a one-trick pony tonight, and I register that, and I go, that's a fair criticism. I think I used the same sweep like 4 times. I sat in half guard a lot, but I did get the finish. And then he said, but, and I'm thinking, oh, thank fuck there was a but. Like, and he goes, I'm going to take him. And it was just like, oh, I don't care. You could say whatever you want. And again, about that agency and like taking ownership of it, like that performance, you look back on it, it was very one-dimensional. Like it was like I didn't strike much, same sweep 3 or 4 times, sat in half guard, just did the work, did the damage I needed to do to get the finish. So again, and then you go, all right, well, I need to maybe add some more wrinkles to my game to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Will the phrase Dana White's one-trick pony ever leave the Instagram bio?
When I reckon I'll take it out when Dana addresses it. So when I've got to a level where Dana's paying attention and he kind of goes like, hey, I was wrong about that kid. That, he's not a one-trick pony, then I'll probably take it out. But up until then, I'll hold off. But I actually want to get Dana in on a horse. I reckon we'll get him into war chest racing. Me and Volk are going to get a horse. So Volk will be coming in. We'll try and get Dana in, maybe Stylebender, and just make sort of a fighters group horse.
Fight horse.
Yeah, something. And I reckon we might call it one trick or something like that.
Hey, that'd be perfect.
That would be cool.
Yet again, that marketability that we were talking about before. You've got the ability to grab onto something and be like, that's mine. That's my gimmick.
Yeah, I love it.
Something else that you and I have spoken about before, not on camera, but just in general. A bit of a gamer. You like your games. I wouldn't necessarily say you're super into it. I don't know. That's your choice to make. Yep. But what are you playing at the moment? Are you playing anything at the moment?
I got right back into COD when the new one came out. I was smashing that. And I still haven't finished Baldur's Gate 3. Like, I'm unbelievable. If people ask me, like, what's the favorite game you've played in the last however many, I'd be like Baldur's Gate 3. But I made a deal with the boys that I started the campaign with that we would go through it all together, only when we're on as a full squad. And then we all agreed to do that, and then they've all gone and finished the campaign solo.
That's dog ass.
They all know what's happening, but I won't do it. I just wait, and I've kind of moved it now where if just one of them is on with me, then we'll play. But I'm still in like the first act because they've all gone and finished, and I'm like, I can't do it without you boys.
That's so dog. It was one of those for the gentleman that you got a PC for.
Yeah.
That's super dog.
Yeah. No, but Hayden, I don't know if Hayden's finished it. The other 2 boys have. But he's definitely gone further than me, the scumbag.
Take the PC back.
Nah. It's a gift. You can't give it back.
That's dog as. What class? What are you playing in Baldur's Gate 3?
I am I'm a fighter. Yeah. What's the one? An Eldritch Knight.
Both doing full roleplay.
Yeah. An Eldritch Knight fighter. Yeah, it's good. I'm only level 5, so still got a long way to go.
Robert Whittaker is also a big gamer, and he talks about how fight camp is the best time for him because the only 2 things he can focus on is fighting and gaming. That's what he does to switch off. Do you go more into gaming fight camp or less into gaming fight camp?
I actually go a little bit less because of my schedule and the way it works. I get too tired to game. So by the time, so it's now 4 o'clock and I've already had the session today. I've got to do one more session before I finish. So by the time I actually sit down and it's 7:30, I kind of sit in front of it and then I'm like, no, this isn't working for me. I'm outside of fight camp when I've got a little bit more energy to do recreational stuff. That's when I'm right into it.
And now I thank you so much for the time. I won't take too much more of it. We are in January 2025. This is always I love January because I get to ask this question to everyone. Yep. You and I are talking. It is January 2025. If I were to talk to you January 2026, what do you hope you can tell me in 2026? What do you hope happens for you in 2025?
Look, I think I'll be riding a 4-fight win streak, and we'll be sitting here talking about how excited I am to fight in front of a Melbourne crowd at Rod Laver Arena. I think I'll be main event or co-main event. And I think, they'll be anchoring the first time they've come to Melbourne in 6 or 7 years on me being in that main event or co-main event slot. And that'll be, one of the biggest things on my bucket list is to fight in my hometown.
How do you feel about the prospects of that happening? We talked about the millions of eyes, The 2 biggest UFC events that have ever happened are both in that arena, are both there. No, it's a lie. They're at Marvel Stadium.
I don't want to fight at Marvel. I think you lose too much of the essence of the fighting in this space. I'd like to do Rod Laver Arena and just do it really well. Rather than do an 80% sold out Marvel where people can't see stuff, I want to do 100% sells out in 2 minutes. Rod Laver Arena, where it's like, Melbourne's boy has come back. It's his first chance to fight, and it's his first chance to fight in, a co-main event or a main event slot.
Thank you so much for the time, Jack. It's always a pleasure. As I said before, we are 4 weeks out. What do the next 4 weeks look like for yourself?
Not much food, a lot of training, and just mentally getting ready. So just all the stuff that I've been doing for the last 10 years, it's just on a little bit more deliberate scale.
How do you go with the weight now that you've brought that up? Because I remember maybe the first time you and I ever spoke to each other was backstage at a local fight. We were watching maybe one of your teammates, someone, and you were kind of talking me through it. And I was with a friend of mine, and you walked away, and my friend went, "He's a featherweight, right?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Looks like a lightweight." Boy, you're a very muscly man. How do you go with making featherweight?
Yeah, I'm pretty cruisy. Like, you get different body types just suit the weight at different times, right? So, like, if you looked at, Sem Kikembo, he walks around and he's always pretty lean, right? He's always pretty lean. He's always in pretty good shape, and he could make weight, on a couple of weeks' notice. That's just not me. Like, I get a little bit bigger, and to get through fight camps, I have to be a little bit bigger. Like, I have to come down gradually. If I was lean, because I go into fight week about 73, and I'm about 7% body fat nearly every time. If I was to walk around at that 7% body fat and be lean, I would just get sick and injured. It just wouldn't be, what's the word I'm looking for, feasible for me to do that. So naturally, I just get bigger. I get up, I walk around about 77, 78 kilos. I feel really healthy there. I feel really good. And then over the course of a 6 or 8 week camp, that comes down to 73, and then I cut from my 73 to 66. But I carry it heavy. And the difference is, what I tell people is, some people say to me, like, "Geez, you look big." And it's like, well, my Instagram is mostly filled with photos of me, like, fight week, right? And it's like, so you get a bit of a disproportionate reading of what I actually look like. Or, I'm on stage at the weigh-ins, or I'm in the cage, and I'm like, I look like that for, 10 or 11 days, and that's it. But I'm a big proponent of working towards a date and peaking for that as a professional. And if you're an amateur, you find somewhere a bit closer to your weight that you walk around at, and you're kind of a little bit more active.
Jack Jenkins, you are nothing if you are not professional. I thank you so much for the time. Best of luck in the fight. I will see you fight week. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.